All right, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio. Now, it's been a while since I've been doing some uploads. I was out of town for a while, and in my last upload, I was rather ill, and you could really tell from the sound of my voice in that previous one. But it's good to be back in action, back in full swing, and sadly, we're going to be starting on a rather somber note. We have just seen the passing of Lyndon H. Larouche Jr., who was quite the game changer when it came to sort of political thought in the 20th century, and of course carrying over into the 21st century. It's like Lyndon LaRouche passed away at the age of 96, and he was really still at it into his mid 90s. You could even hear him in interviews and giving public appearances, in his senior years. And there's something very formidable about that, and it's also something very accomplished about LaRouche. The largest upload I did on this channel was actually sort of kind of a critical examination of Lyndon LaRouche. I don't necessarily agree with everything that he said. He has an enormous platform and he has an enormous legacy, but it's admirable all the same. I've been very critical of some things about the LaRouche movement in the past. The largest upload I did on this one was called Lyndon Larouche, Genius or Fraud, where I was just like, I really wanted to get to kind of the bottom of things. Was this guy and then LaRouche, who was running, a political movement? LaRouche PAC is still up and strong and in full swing. I was like, is the motivation for the Lyndon LaRouche movement based on genuine ideas, or is it kind of mixing the facts with far out wacky ideas to have a following for the sake of having a following, and also crafting delusional arguments so that someone can have their own brand of politics? And we did an examination on that. But right now, since Lyndon LaRouche has only recently passed away, I think we should probably focus more on some of the good things that LaRouche did in his life. And running for president 8 times is something, to say. It's like founding the U.S. Labor Party and being their presidential candidate in 1976. That's also a noteworthy accomplishment. I mean, I certainly have never done that. I mean, well, for starters, I'm too young to be president. And for seconds, I don't have a political movement or a political party. I don't ever intend to run for president, by the way. I just think that it's a noteworthy accomplishment of Lyndon LaRouche. And it's like right now it's just time, we can look back on many things. I'd say that the LaRouche movement really kind of triggered a lot of things for me in kind of curiosity. from the instant from the instantaneous beginnings. I was just like, okay, these guys are talking about so many things. I want to know more about it. Like, what is going on, with the theories of the Black Venetians and the Empire of Venice? I mean, they talk about so many individuals like Giovanni Gianmaria Ortes, Abate Antonio Conti, about how really it was the LaRouche movement that was the first group that I heard that talked about how oligarchs who are in power try to manipulate human thought by putting out sort of kind of falsehoods into mainstream literature, into mainstream public culture. And you might be thinking, yes, of course, things like propaganda exist, but they're really just sort of saying that a lot of the people that we look to as icons are actually kind of working with the major governments to pollute and contaminate human thought. And some people that the LaRouche movement identified would be Karl Marx, who was referred to as a British agent. We did an upload on this channel all about Karl Marx being an agent of the British Empire, Charles Darwin, Herbert Spencer, and absolutely, absolutely Malthus and Bentham and James Mill and John Stuart Mill. Although in my own kind of interpretations, I did kind of sort of see that John Stuart Mill came a little bit later, but he's a little bit different. But when you look at Malthus, Bentham, and James Mill, they were heavily inspired by Jean Maria Ortes, who was a sort of defrocked monk and thinker from Venice in Italy, and he was about kind of putting out sort of things for the elite ruling class that would be beneficial to them. In short, oligarchy exists to preserve oligarchy, and they wanted to contaminate human thought so people would go along with the ways that benefit the oligarchs, that the small group of people that are controlling, well, mostly everything. The Larouche movement has many things to say about that. And at the very least, even if you don't accept all the claims that the Larouche movement made, that Lyndon Larouche himself made, it's like it gets you curious, and then you want to read up more about it. I mean, over the last 7 or 8 years, you never would have heard me talk about Italian history in any way, like, unless maybe the Roman Empire, if it hadn't been, for like watching like the stuff from the LaRouche movement online. And then I get curious. I'm like, okay, I want to learn more about this subject. So, in the thought provoking sense, the LaRouche movement has done a lot of good for a lot of people. And it's not only about, European thinkers who kind of forged the age of enlightenment, like Abate Antonio Conti, we mentioned. It's also about talking about the American system of political economy, Alexander Hamilton and Henry Clay. And Lyndon LaRouche also had four economic laws: reinstate Glass-Steagall, nationalize the Federal Reserve slash create a national bank, infrastructure projects and space exploration. And once again, it's a different way of thinking. And one of the things that we have to deal with in life is there are many political thinkers out there, and a lot of people just want to close the door to all of them. They just want to be like, we're going to look at Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC, and these cable networks are just going to be all there is. There's absolutely nothing else out there other than what's on the cable television networks. But the thing is, you can't do that. You have to sort of have at least somewhat of a sense of, is this person contributing something to the discussion? Like, and Lyndon LaRouche definitely did raise attention to a lot of things, and I love the YouTube channel Oakland LYM. LYM, I believe, meaning LaRouche Youth Movement, but the Oakland LYM channel put out so many things associated with the LaRouche speeches over the years, and I highly recommended one, Building a Bridge from Hell to Purgatory. And also, there are lots of interviews that LaRouche has done from the 70s and 80s that are online. I mean, I have to confess, though, even though we're trying to remember and honor his life, it's like LaRouche did really seem to have a very, very large view of his own kind of worldview. He thought very highly of himself. He said he was the greatest economist on earth currently alive and stuff like that. But what we really can say is that he made some very large accomplishments. I just learned, following reading the headlines about LaRouche's death a couple days ago, that LaRouche wrote a book called The Truth About Milton Friedman, and I can't wait to read that one. I can't wait to get my hands on a copy of that, because Milton Friedman, he, once again, he's another person who is somewhat controversial, but at the same time, a very accomplished thinker of the 20th century and Nobel Prize recipient. And Milton Friedman, of course, is all about free market economics, whereas Lyndon LaRouche is quite to the contrary and views the kind of free market economics as a pollutant of human thought, where it's like it's kind of an excuse to have the free slave trade and the free drug trade. And once again, that it comes from the kind of notion that, I guess you would say, a strong public sector is what drives the nation forward. Therefore, you have to entertain the kind of American system of political economy, most notably the thinking of Alexander Hamilton and his arguments for the Bank of the United States and infrastructure projects, as well as just trying to link humanity together through things. Look, I mean, LaRouche was all about that, talking about the railway from Dakar to Djibouti to develop the Sahel. And in the documentary that they have online for LaRouche's autobiography, The Power of Reason, you can really see that many heads of state in the 20th century met with Lyndon LaRouche, and they took his ideas very seriously. I mean, once again, I can't really endorse absolutely everything that LaRouche is saying, because I'm somewhat even skeptical about the motivations that he had for raising certain issues, or perhaps the motivations about why he wasn't more successful running for president. I mean, anytime there was a problem with the LaRouche movement, his response was, well, people are trying to shut him down because he's just so awesome and so brilliant, and he's going to take away all the corruption that they're going to benefit from. I mean, that's what a lot of people say. I mean, other candidates, libertarians, have even said that about their own candidates, that the same motivations, that people will shut them down because they want to preserve the oligarchy and the status quo and all of those things. But right now, it's like, even though, like I said, even if you don't agree with everything that somebody says, you can still kind of admire some of the accomplishments that they had in their life. And I mean, and to an extent, Lyndon LaRouche has been somewhat of a political influence on my own thinking in daily life. Like when you listen to things about, do we want big government or small government? But once again, Milton Friedman has been as well. So it's like when I heard he wrote the book about him, I was thinking that I would really like to just kind of go through that. And I like listening to different points of view. We're talking about the exchange of ideas, and it's not about, to just kind of look for something that's going to reinforce your own prejudice. It's about, what is this person saying? Is there any merit or value to their ideas? Can this be beneficial to humanity? And people like Lyndon LaRouche and Milton Friedman have things in there. Even if you don't agree with everything that they're saying, you can get a few sentences every now and then. They're just like, wow, wait, maybe that is a good way of looking at things. And I'm still going to keep up with the Lyndon LaRouche material. I mentioned in my previous LaRouche upload that I'm a big fan of Jason Ross, who is one of the scientific advisors for the LaRouche Pack. I think he's a very good presenter. I also follow the LaRouche Daily Updates um, every day if I can get a chance. They're just short little email things you can subscribe to. But right now, it's like all we can say is rest in peace for Lyndon LaRouche. Definitely a sort of accomplished political thinker of the 20th century. And, accomplished meaning that he was able to develop a political movement, founded the U.S. Labor Party, ran for president 8 times, wrote countless books and articles and chapters in other people's books. And, they had their own sort of publishing company with the LaRouche movement. Definitely also someone who talked a lot about ideas in a different school of thought. So rest in peace, Lyndon LaRouche, and the journey continues.